I only made one video specifically on the topic of gang stalking. And having just watched a video about gang stalking, I now realise that my last half dozen videos have been on the same topic. It was kind of click, click, click. First of all, I had my home broken into without a warrant, by the police without a warrant, on the 4th of May 2010. That was within a month or two of my book Deadly Daddy being uploaded to the internet. It has since vanished. And the friend who uploaded it for me, by the way, shortly thereafter went to work for the local council. He insisted on attaching a PayPal to it. Well, I have no idea how PayPal works, so I was never able to claim on that, whether or not anyone ever read that book. I was never able to get any money from it, and I didn't actually want to, but he insisted. I said, no, I want this to be free information. I'm not looking to make money from it. But he attached to PayPal and then did not tell me how to access it, so I assume he did. Kevin Price, what have you to say? Kevin Price of Aberystwyth, unless you've moved, and no, I saw you in Aberyron last September, if you recall. Okay. And in April of 2010, possibly a little before that, no, I would say April, I was in contact with Take a Break magazine on the same topic of my father and his ring and paedophilia, etc. Take a Break magazine agreed to publish my story and took from me, dozens of photographs and documents, which they ran through their computer and did give back to me, along with a written contract, a written and signed contract in the drawer over there. I will flash it up presently. That contract was signed on the 14th of May 2010, by which time I was a nervous wreck. As I said, my home was searched without a warrant on the 4th of May. I was a complete nervous wreck, but I travelled to London anyway to retrieve my photographs and sign the contract, because by that time I had already lost trust. Very shortly thereafter, Take a Break reneged on the contract. The reason they gave me was that my brother did not believe what I was saying. I can't imagine why I agreed ever to give them any contact details for my brother in the first place. And I had told them that my brother would not believe what I was saying. By the way, he now does believe quite a lot of what I'm saying, and it fits with his own life experience. So that's Take a Break, making the contract and breaking the contract. Take a Break at that time was owned by Richard Desmond, media mogul, millionaire or billionaire. I still believe he is related in some way to Richard Desmond, who was the real author of the book I've mentioned on other videos called Might is Right. The book which recommends culling humans, among other things. It also recommended cannibalism of babies. I must find that chapter and flash it up as well. And it also recommended rape, etc., etc., etc. Which is why, of course, Anton LaVey seized upon it and took it as his own and called it the Satanic Bible. It was such an eye-opener watching the video that I've just watched. I thought, God, I thought I'd only made one video about gang stalking, and all of the last few videos I've uploaded have been on that topic. Such as the long list of crimes I never committed, but which are recorded as crimes anyway. And eventually, as I've said in my last 2 videos, I did commit crimes. Although I would say one of them at least was more against myself than anyone else. I slashed my arms. That was the source of the blood that I daubed on buildings that night. My slashed arms. And I had, in 2008 to 9, been having psychotherapy for what the psychotherapist Mary Jenkins, MERJA, Finnish woman, for what she called complex post-traumatic stress disorder. No, she didn't. She called it extremely severe post-traumatic stress, which is the same thing. She said just one of the incidents that I had described would have been enough to give me post-traumatic stress. And as she pointed out, I was describing dozens. I'd had that psychotherapy, as I say, from, I think it was the April of 2008 through to the January of 2009, when it was abruptly ceased. And I was told that if I left my home in Godricrag and moved to Ceredigion, that psychotherapy would begin again. I did all that and it didn't begin again. Never an explanation of that. But once I had left Godricrag, well, even before, because that was where my home was searched, illegally, I was absolutely gang-stalked from that second onwards. I would even now say that Act Vans of Neath, whose actions I have described, whose despicable actions I have described, were part of this gang-stalking program. I would say they'd been dragged in and used in that capacity after what I just watched and listened to. I believe that. And I've said that the building I lived in for 10 months. Yeah, 10 months. Was a house of horrors. An absolute house of horrors. The heating was turned up so high that the woman who took my flat after I left said to the other tenants, no wonder she went mad. And I note that that flat has been vacated at regular intervals. Nobody lasts long in it. Because not only was the heating turned up incredibly high, the pipes were red hot to the touch, the pipes in this tiny flat. Absolutely red hot to the touch. And there was a glass ceiling, I kid you not, that just outside the flat, which did act as a greenhouse. And heat rose from below. The communal sitting room was immediately below my flat. So there was terrific heat also rising from below. So it came from above, it was from below, and it was in the flat itself. And the solicitor did recommend me to record the temperatures before telling me that legal aid had been withdrawn. So by the time I did go berserk and break into the communal kitchen in order to get drinking water in these terrible temperatures, by that time I had 6 months of it. And when I consider that, I had taken my top off in a communal room. It was midnight. Everyone else was in bed. They were all old folk. I.e. old enough to be my parents or grandparents. I had taken my top off because I couldn't stand the heat, and I'd opened the doors as well. I gather they're now kept permanently locked 24/7. I was told that just the other day. And the tenant who was talking to me said it felt like a prison. And that a lot of the tenants agreed that it felt like a prison. Same building that I left in June of 2011. There I was constantly monitored. Constantly. There was the most dreadful system. It's one thing if you can call out for help, that's a good thing. But if people can keep on buzzing you, for no reason whatsoever. That is harassment. And that was what was done. The buzzer would go off, oh so loud. Here, there and everywhere. Oh, come down and sign some papers. Or why couldn't you have waited till I was walking past your office on my way out? Eventually I did tear that device off the wall, which of course went down against me. But I couldn't stand it any longer. And yes, you could say that was criminal damage, I suppose. But it was also self-defense. It was driving me insane, coupled with the heat, the noise, the constant noise, the constant intrusions on my privacy. Especially given that I already did have recorded post-traumatic stress. It would have been enough to drive a saint mad. And on the very day that I told Lara Lee that I must have continued access to the communal kitchen, she locked it. Well, she had it locked. Which was why, as I say, I broke in for water. I did tell a lie on a video which I've only just uploaded. I said I took the bread knife for bread and cheese in my bag. I didn't. I took it for self-defense, because by that time I knew I was under attack. I had no intention of using it on anyone who didn't attack me first. And of course, when I was attacked by policemen with a taser, I did not use the knife. It remained in the bag. But I was so terrified by then that when I was going through the cutlery drawer and everything I could reach in that kitchen from the hatch that I'd broken, I did take out the knife and think, I need this to defend myself. It wasn't for bread and cheese. I don't, because I remember trying to access my food, which was in the fridge, and I couldn't get to it. And why would I do that if I had bread and cheese in my bag? I don't think I did. I think that's something I've convinced myself of over the years. But I can remember thinking, no, I need to defend myself. I need something to defend myself with. And then, of course, I moved to Newquay, which, as I said, most delightful little village, absolutely beautiful, and 90% of its occupants, lovely, lovely, kind people. That has to be said. The building I moved into was a hovel, and the landlady was horrendous, and she had henchmen. There were no facilities to wash clothes, and the nearest laundrette was a 2-hour round trip away, in any direction. It was a horrible way to live. It was like, I'd say it was like becoming an animal, but that would be an insult to animals, because animals keep themselves so clean. My dogs do. And I just wasn't able to. As I say, washing clothes was just not possible. Really. Who's going to lug great bags of washing on a bus, hour there, hour back, and you can't take your dog with you? You've got to leave her in this hovel where you know she isn't safe, because people go in whenever you go out. It wasn't going to happen. So I spent a lot of time walking around in dirty clothes. There was a shower in there. I'll give her that. There was a shower. I could shower and then put dirty clothes on. It was all very demoralizing, in other words. And although actually the police changed the locks for me and set up a security system, whereby an alarm would go off if anyone came in when I wasn't there. The landlady subsequently obtained another key from them and actually said to me, "You've changed the locks." So clearly she was admitting to having gone in my absence. Otherwise, how would she know I had changed the lock? Although I didn't. It was the police who did that. This makes me a bit... I can only think the Newquay police went in on this. And of course my alarm was then deactivated. Eventually I did take to setting up booby traps for her when she went in. And eventually she came a cropper with one of the booby traps and came to my door, quite severely bruised, and gave me an eviction notice. I was incredibly sorry to leave Newquay, but to get away from her was bliss, absolute bliss, her and her henchman. Otherwise I was devastated at having to leave Newquay, because as long as I had Newquay and my dog, I could still survive, and I could still say I had a life. But one of the many things that did happen while I was there wasn't in the flat. It was on a bus returning from Aberystwyth, and a man spent the entire trip threatening to slit my throat. And I went to the bus driver for help, and he did nothing. When we got to Aberystwyth, I called the police, and they subsequently told me that the CCTV had not been working, and the driver denied that I'd gone to him for help. The name of my aggressor that night, I went and did my own detective work, was Andy Williams, and he lived up in Bourth. Easy to find out. If I could find it out, the police could find it out. It is, of course, an offence, a criminal offence, to spend 40 minutes or... No. What am I talking about? 40 minutes? Yeah, about 40 minutes from Aber to Aberystwyth, after which he stopped when I called the police. 40 minutes threatening to slit my throat. And we were the only 2 passengers on the bus. And I couldn't get out. You'd have to see the country lanes around there. You can't get out. There's nowhere to go. You'd be getting out into total darkness on very dangerous country lanes. So there was that as well. And there was the teen stuff again, calling out this, that and the other. But I was more or less able to ignore them because I could get away from them quite easily in Newquay. All I had to do was go down to the harbour and I was away from them. It was like the top end was unsafe and the bottom end was totally safe. Down by the harbour, the cafes, and where everyone to see the dolphins, the tourists were there. You were safe there. Although a lot of days I bussed my dog and myself up to Aberystwyth, and we would walk all around there. Plenty of walks for dogs in Aberystwyth, as in Aberystwyth. Plenty of walks around the castle grounds, along the seafront. There's a park. There's all kinds of things. So I did spend a lot of the time that I was living in beautiful, beautiful Newquay, actually, in Aberystwyth. Anyway, that was that. And of course I moved straight from there to Command. And I have already said, I think, on some video that as soon as I got to Command I collapsed. And my dog was looked after for a few weeks. And I spent those few weeks in bed. Couldn't get out. Now I see the advice the man I've just been watching gives is on no account to allow yourself to become isolated. I now have no choice about that one. I've been isolated for the last 3 years since I got to this valley. Very isolated, like solitary confinement most of the time. And the worse my health gets, the more that is so. I can't do anything about it. I did get a long time ago that I must not in any way be predictable. That I must be totally unpredictable. In my movements, this is. You do not have a routine. As someone with OCD, and I do still have OCD, routine is very important to me. And of course it's also very important to dogs. If a dog doesn't have a routine it can rely on, it starts to go nuts as well. But I did learn ages ago not to be predictable in my movements. to set off in one direction and then go in another, for example. Or to set off as if I was going to take a bus trip somewhere and then come back. About 10 minutes later, walk to the bus stop and then walk back. Although I've been assured by the landlady of this place, whom I don't believe, because I don't trust any landlords or landladies anymore, not the private ones. Council, yes. Council in the old days, not now. What I've done in this particular place is to seal the keyhole before leaving. Obviously not completely, not with concrete or anything, because I need to get back in, but just in such a way that anyone inserting a key would leave an impression of the key, and I would know they'd been in, and they would know that I knew. Mind you, they seem to like doing that, because, as I said in command, quite apart from the sewage flood, and the night before the sewage flood, a light bulb was replaced on the staircase that had been out for weeks. And the reason that it had been out for weeks was because I was not tall enough to reach it. And you cannot put a ladder safely on a staircase. So there was no way for me to replace that light bulb. And yet when I got in on that night, the light bulb was in and on. If it hadn't been on, I wouldn't have noticed it had been replaced. And I've already said he took 2 books. I don't know if it's coincidence that the books he pinched were the Satanic Bible, which I was using for research. And I don't know whether to call it the sequel or what, but there was another book which was about the Satanic Bible. The book which informed me, if I hadn't noticed it for myself, that the Satanic Bible was plagiarized from Ragnar Redbeard's Might is Right, to the extent that eventually Anton LaVey had to acknowledge the now dead Ragnar Redbeard as co-author. I mean, he must have been dead by the time Anton LaVey finally acknowledged him as co-author, which he was not. It was a plagiarized book. They lived in different eras. They lived on different continents, even. It wasn't a joint effort. It was a simple plagiarism. Anyway, those 2 books were stolen. They all moved to a place where I never found them again. On one occasion, I came down one morning, and 2 of my pictures had been taken down. I hadn't mentioned that one. They had been cut down, which meant that somebody had entered the place while I was asleep in bed. And my dog was downstairs. I'm amazed she didn't alert me. But she was going downhill terribly by that time. She was close to death. In fact, I couldn't acknowledge to myself because she was all I had. And I loved her dearly. Very dearly. She was my partner. She was my family. She was my best friend. She was everything to me. I couldn't acknowledge to myself that she was dying, and that was most unfair to her. But I couldn't. Anyway, someone came in while I was asleep in my bed and cut down my pictures. That was another thing I'd forgotten to mention. Well, of course you become terrified to go out. Of course you do. At that time, my COPD had not degenerated very much, and I was still able to lug suitcases around. And travelling on buses was not a problem to me physically. But I did become terrified. I now have an aversive reaction to Carmarthen, which I used to like, because every single time I went there, the landlord went in and I knew, and made it clear to me that he had been in. Nigel Roddenhurst. I hadn't named him before, but I'm naming him now. Nigel Roddenhurst. Oh yes, and the landlord down at Newquay was Liz Howells. Landlady. See how they like being recorded and watched. And And of course, everything I've mentioned in all of my recent videos is kind of bullet pointed in the video I've just watched about gang stalking. And I thought, oh, it's all been gang stalking for 6 years. And this bit about not allowing yourself to become isolated and not staying indoors, I cannot follow that advice anymore. I absolutely cannot follow it, because every time I go out now I get incredibly breathless. Just a trip around the block yesterday rendered me breathless for the rest of the day. And my 2 trips to Aberystwyth this week have been disastrous for me. Lovely for my dog, but disastrous for me. Yeah, if anyone has watched this, I suggest that you rewatch the last half dozen videos or so, and you'll see that all of it falls under the heading of gang stalking, as I have just seen.